You! Off the porch! This is not your property!" she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at me like she was about to cast a suburban hex. The only problem? I was sitting on my own front steps, sipping a hot cup of coffee, wearing a USMC hoodie, and wondering why this stranger thought she had the authority to evict me from my own home. I hadn't even swallowed my first sip when chaos kicked in. It was just another quiet Saturday morning in rural Alabama. The sun had barely crested over the pine trees and the dew still clung to the grass like nature's morning yawn. I had my coffee, my dog Scout curled up at my feet, and the peaceful hum of spring around me. Then she came stomping down the sidewalk like a pink-clad hurricane, blazer, clipboard, massive sunglasses, and that all-too-familiar haircut. The kind of woman whose voice travels faster than her logic. I didn't recognize her at first, but that didn't stop her from marching right up my driveway as if she owned it. "Excuse me, sir, you can't just sit here like this," she said, huffing, as though the sight of a man on his own property was somehow offensive. I blinked slowly, trying to process the absurdity before responding. "Morning to you too. And I can't sit where exactly?" I gestured around. "On my porch." "This is a common-use community entry point," she snapped. "You're in violation of HOA Ordinance 12B, no loitering in shared zones." That was when I knew she was either completely delusional or had just graduated from the University of Make It Up As You Go. I tried not to laugh. "Ma'am," I said gently, "I built this porch with my own 2 hands. The lumber store still sends me holiday coupons. This is my house. There's no HOA here." She clicked her pen like it was a loaded weapon and brandished a sheet of paper toward me. It looked like something printed from a middle schooler's PowerPoint. Comic Sans font, clip art of a judge's gavel, and some random lines about community enhancement restrictions that had zero legal backing. "I am the interim president of the transition board," she said with pride, "and we are initiating compliance protocols." That sentence alone could have fueled an entire stand-up special. I took the paper, glanced at it, and handed it back. "There's no HOA. And even if there was, this isn't how it works. You don't just create one and start handing out fake fines." She stepped closer, voice rising. "You are non-compliant. I am issuing a verbal notice of removal. Please vacate the porch immediately." Scout, my old golden retriever, perked up his ears and gave a low growl. Even he sensed we were dealing with a special brand of crazy. I patted him on the head and stood up slowly. Not because I was intimidated, because I knew I needed to stay calm. Last thing I wanted was this woman trying to spin some tale to the police. "That's not going to happen," I said firmly. "You're trespassing, and if you don't step off my property in the next 10 seconds, I'll be calling the sheriff myself." She smirked. "Good. Call them. In fact, I'll do you one better." She whipped out her phone and put it on speaker. The man who answered sounded like he was elbow-deep in a bucket of motor oil. "Greg," she barked, "this is an emergency. That male is refusing to leave the entry porch. I need HOA enforcement at Lot 17. Now, I don't know what HOA enforcers look like in her fantasy world, but Greg sounded more like the kind of guy who sells radiator caps out of a van behind an auto shop. I raised my eyebrows. "On my way," he said gruffly. "Tell him we don't mess around." Karen, because of course that was her name, turned to me triumphantly. "See? Certified compliance officer is en route. You're in big trouble." That was it. I'd had my fill of this poorly scripted community theater. I calmly pulled out my phone and texted a single sentence into my Marine Corps unit group chat. "Some nut is trying to evict me from my porch. Feel like dropping by." Within 30 seconds, the chat lit up. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages like "Be there in 20, want me in uniform or casual, and bring the flags," flooded in. These weren't just old war buddies. They were federal agents, deputies, military lawyers, firefighters, brothers I'd bled with, and some who owed me a beer or 3. While Karen was busy taking pictures of my house and mumbling about non-regulation colors on flower pots, I leaned back on the porch, took another sip of coffee, and grinned. She had no idea what she had just stepped into. 15 minutes later, the first one rolled up, Jack. Tall, broad-shouldered, and still in full sheriff uniform after his morning shift. He got out of his cruiser, casually walked up the driveway, and gave me a bear hug before glancing over at Karen, who looked like she just swallowed a lemon. "Everything all right, brother?" he asked. "Just dealing with an HOA transition board," I said, adding finger quotes. Jack raised an eyebrow at Karen. "Ma'am, you got business here?" "I do," she said proudly. "I'm acting on behalf of the HOA. He's violating porch codes." Jack slowly took off his sunglasses. "There's no HOA here. This street never had one. And if you keep issuing fake compliance notices, you're going to end up in real legal trouble." Karen went pale. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 more trucks pulled up. Another uniform. Then another. Before long, my quiet front yard looked like the pregame of a Marine Corps reunion, and Karen stood frozen in place, clutching her clipboard like a teddy bear during a thunderstorm. She had come to evict me from my porch. But my entire unit was about to show her exactly who she was messing with. By the time the morning haze lifted and sunlight poured across the yard, my porch had become the most unintentionally fortified front step in the entire county. Jack was still there, leaned casually against the railing, sipping coffee with his badge clipped neatly on his belt. My dog Scout had found a sunny spot and was snoring like a chainsaw in idle. You'd think that would be enough to make Karen reconsider, maybe apologize, maybe just quietly back away and move on with her life. But no, Karen wasn't the kind of woman who retreats. She was the kind who doubles down. And boy, did she double down. Around noon, I stepped out to retrieve my mail and found the neighborhood littered with poorly printed flyers taped to lampposts, trash cans, and even some cars. All of them had the same ridiculous header in bold red letters. Emergency HOA Meeting Community Violation at Lot 17. Beneath that was a grainy photo of me on my porch, coffee in hand, dog asleep beside me, with the caption, "Unauthorized Occupation of Community Entryway." I almost spit out my gum laughing. Karen had turned my peaceful Saturday morning into a full-blown smear campaign. I gathered up a few of the flyers and brought them back to the porch. Jack skimmed one and shook his head. "This lady's trying to go full dictator with a printer and zero actual authority." The funniest part wasn't even the content. It was the fact that the photo looked like it had been taken with a flip phone from 2007. You could barely make out my face. It looked like I was being accused of loitering in a grainy crime reenactment video. Karen must have stayed up all night creating these. Things got even more bizarre when her so-called certified compliance officer arrived. It was the same guy she'd called on the phone yesterday, Greg. He showed up in a beat-up sedan that still had a "for sale" sign in the window. He stepped out wearing a reflective vest, khaki cargo pants, and a ball cap that read "Security" in peeling letters. He carried a clipboard and walked with the exaggerated confidence of a man who'd just been given fake power. He didn't even glance at me as he strutted toward the porch. He cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a sermon. "Sir," he began, adjusting the cheap sunglasses on his nose, "you've been officially flagged for non-compliance with the Homeowners Association's Civic Guidelines, Section 3.2 regarding porch occupation and visual uniformity." I blinked. "Did you just say visual uniformity?" He nodded seriously. "Yes, sir. This porch doesn't comply with community harmony aesthetics." Jack let out a wheezing laugh and nearly spilled his coffee. "I'm sorry, did you just insult a Marine's porch design?" he said, walking forward with slow, deliberate steps. "Let me see some ID, Greg." Greg hesitated, then pulled a laminated card from his vest. It was a gym membership with his name scribbled in marker on the back. Jack stared at it for a moment, then looked back at me. "He's serious." "I'm not leaving," I said calmly. And unless you're about to issue me a violation from the Department of